Hello. I decided to look into the Southern Baptist Convention for this week's discussion. I grew up Assemblies of God, actually in Springfield, Missouri, which was where they're headquartered. But even in the capital city, if you will, of the AG, there are a lot of Southern Baptist churches. In fact, I went to the largest Christian school there in Springfield, and more than half the families they attended Southern Baptist churches. So it's definitely a big part of that city. Even though I'm fairly familiar with the beliefs of the Baptist Church and the Southern Baptist Convention, I don't really know much about their history, so I decided to look into that, especially since I'm attending Liberty, which is a Baptist institution. So, most notably, the Southern Baptist Convention is the second largest denomination in the United States, just behind the Catholic Church. So this would make it the largest Protestant denomination. The Baptist stream of faith can trace its origins all the way back to the early 17th century, when you had religious dissidents from Europe, the Baptists, coming to America to seek religious freedom. Many of these immigrants bought and settled land in the middle colonies and the southern colonies like Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, and they actually sent out their first international missionaries in the 18th century, which contributes to the evangelistic nature of the United States even prior to its formation as a nation. The first national organization of Baptists formed in 1814, and as they institutionalized, they engraved themselves in American religious culture and practices, but they also found themselves in the middle of this slavery and race question as well. Initially, most Northerners and Southerners were supportive, or at least indifferent on the question of slavery. There were a lot of Northerners that profited from the slave trade, and that would include some Baptists as well. National opinions began to divide the churches in the 30 years between 1814 and 1844. In that year, all the tensions came to a point when there were Baptists in Georgia that were trying to appoint a slaveholding man to become a home missionary. And the request was denied, and it was followed by a similar request in Alabama. Once the Alabama request was denied, the Virginia Baptists called a meeting, and I believe they met in Charleston, South Carolina, and to discuss all the events. And it was decided that the differences in opinion on slavery was inhibiting the good work, the missionary work that they were attempting to do. So the Southern Baptists decided to follow in the footsteps of the Methodists, who a few years earlier the Southern churches had broken off of the Northern churches and break off from the Baptist churches in the North. This led to the creation of the Southern Baptist Convention in May of 1845. It was more centralized than its northern counterpart. It had a little bit stronger church polity, actually. And the Civil War that followed 15 years after further separated the two denominations. One of the only connections that survived between the two denominations throughout the Civil War was the Southern Baptist Convention's connection to the American Baptist Publication Society. They were based out of Philadelphia. Throughout the 1880s, there were efforts to create a Southern counterpart to the Publication Society, but it met significant opposition by actually Southern ministers that benefited from the productions coming out of Philadelphia. Eventually, the Southern Baptists formed the Sunday School Board in 1891. They based it out of Nashville, Tennessee, which is where the Southern Baptist Convention is currently based out of. And the creation of this board, of this organization, further cemented the denomination's central organization in the country. And the Sunday School Board eventually became known as Lifeway Christian Resources, which many people are familiar with, as they provide lots of resources to churches, individuals, education, for biblical education. The history of the Southern Baptist Convention pretty closely follows or even preempts the cultural and political condition of the United States. It went through a lot of the same struggles. Some of the stories are very similar of the families. They came to America to seek religious freedom. They achieved religious freedom, but then faced the question of slavery. And just as the nation was facing that question, the Baptists faced that as well. And even the split of the Southern Baptist, or the split of the Baptists, even preempted the split of the country in the Civil War. Over time, the denomination has seen a growth of unity, just as the country has as well. So, thank you.